Hello everyone, James here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm really excited because I'm going to be painting with my Sennelier watercolour paints. I bought these paints quite a long time ago, probably about a year ago, and I fell in love with them the minute I started using them. You'll probably hear me say that about quite a lot of paints on this channel because there aren't many that I don't like and they all have pretty unique qualities that make them very special, and that's quite a nice thing because it means that I can use paints to fit the mood that I'm in. You know, I don't know, I kind of give my paints a bit of a personality. Is that strange? I think that's probably quite strange. So these paints are by no means cheap. I bought them on quite a hefty discount and still it made me sweat a little bit. But I have to say that they're lovely to paint with. They're buttery, kind of creamy consistency, and Sennelier say that they use more honey than normal to increase the brightness of the colours. And what's interesting about that is that I feel like the paints don't dry as dull as other colours. You know when you paint something down and you think, oh, that looks so nice, that red that I painted there looks so bright and vibrant, and then when it's dry you're like, why does it look dull? And I don't feel like I get as much of that with Sennelier. But before we go too far, I just want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing here. I'm using a red underpainting to start building out where I'm going to add my darkest values. And that helps me build up my layers around the painting and remain focused throughout the process as well. Otherwise I tend to lose my way. I talk a lot on this channel about building a map of values, and this is really the first stage. Now normally I wouldn't do it with red. I'd build up with the same skin tone mixture that I would use for the base wash. And I decided to go this slightly different route to get that difference in colour down on the page almost immediately. And actually I really feel like it helped me build out the portrait. I was a lot more confident about adding colour, adding a little bit more yellow, adding a little bit more red, and then adding a little bit more blue with the shadows. And there's another subtle difference as well to this painting. I'm not using pyrrole red for the first time in ages. It's far too warm for the effect that I was trying to achieve here. I wanted a much cooler tone to the painting. So normally I'd reach for alizarin crimson, but I've read recently that that might not be as light fast as I want it to be. So while I do some tests, I decided to use some carmine instead. It's this sort of magenta colour that leans towards blue, and it's a really nice paint in the Sennelier set. The other reason why I didn't use alizarin crimson is because in the Sennelier set, it's not a great colour. It's kind of brown. It's not what I would expect alizarin crimson to be from other paints that I've used, from Daniel Smith, Winsor & Newton, Core I think have one that I've got in my collection of Core I think. And so I was just going to go nowhere near it. It was kind of almost earthen toned. Nice colour, but not what I was looking for whatsoever. So long story short, the carmine is helping me achieve this kind of ghostly pale look to him. It's not warm at all, and it feels quite sort of, cold and spectral, and I'm not sure if that really carried through to the very end, but in these early stages I was certainly sort of quite excited about the temperature that the painting was leaning towards, for sure. For the shadows, I decided I was going to try something a little bit different. I'd been watching a video by Art Prof here on YouTube. Their videos are just littered with great art advice, so I highly recommend you checking them out if you don't know them already. But the main tutor had mentioned that she uses a mixture of alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue to make shadows, and that they feel a lot more natural. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to try that next time I get my paints out. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to go back. When I first started painting with watercolours, I used cerulean blue for shadows and I just glazed on top with it. But I felt like that was a bit too bright. And then for the longest time, I just used ultramarine blue. A very, very, very pale wash of it, and I really liked it. It was much more sophisticated. But when you mix a little bit of alizarin crimson in with ultramarine, it goes this kind of beautiful lavender that plays off really, really well with this particular skin tone, especially if you use something like a magenta in the base skin tone itself. It just blends really seamlessly. So as you know, I didn't pick alizarin crimson to paint with this painting, so I used the carmine instead, and I just feel like the shadows sort of felt more seamless, they felt more natural. I barely had to use any line work towards the end of the painting, and that was kind of exciting. So you know when you find like one thing that you change about the way you paint something and you're like, oh, it's such a tiny detail and no one is going to be as excited about this as I am. But I am really excited about it. The other thing worth mentioning is that the ultramarine is ultramarine deep. Now I don't have any pigment information about it because I kind of feel like it's quite hard to get hold of, but if I find it on the handprint website, I'll put it on the screen for you. It doesn't granulate as much as any other ultramarine blue I've used before, so I'd be really intrigued to find out actually what it is. But what that means is that it goes down a lot smoother on the paper, and that I think is what had the biggest effect on the shadows, not just the addition of crimson. Just before I go any further, there's actually a video on my Patreon about how I built the shadows in this painting. So if you want to learn a little bit about my process, head over to patreon.com/finelinernerd, and I only have one tier, it's £5, and the tutorial about shadows is one of the mini monthly tutorials. There's also a main tutorial that's exclusive and not shown on YouTube. So there are loads and loads of really great goodies over there. If you want to check it out and support the channel, then please do. So now you can see his face a little bit closer up. You can see that the paints layer really, really nicely, and they don't remove each other as they get built up on top of each other, which is a sign of a really good binder. And it's also a sign of my patience, I have to admit, because I was letting my layers dry fully. I wasn't using a hairdryer. So they just tick a lot of boxes. Really clean colour, really easy to layer with, and the colours and pigments that they've chosen work really seamlessly together as well. Now it's time for some details, so any arachnophobes, please look away. I didn't really give you fair warning. I mean, it's pretty grim. I posted this on Instagram tonight and I've had loads of people like, whoa, what's going on? That's so gross, but it's so cool. Well, I don't know if it's cool, but it's definitely gross. And if you think it's bad looking at it, imagine what it's like to have painted it. I mean, I don't particularly loathe spiders, but I don't want to be near one. But yeah, anyway. So time for some finishing touches. I wanted to bring out the shapes of his eyes. I wanted to add a drop shadow under his face onto his chest. And I'm just adding tiny little bits, like a little bit of liner around the lip to increase the contrast around that and really bring out the shape. I'm just working on some of the line work in some of the darkest areas. And this is probably the biggest change that I've had over the last couple of weeks, is that my line work has got paler and paler and paler, and is now just really hinting at the weight of a shadow. And I'm using it very sparingly. Anyway, I think that's quite enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. Huge thank you to my patrons for your support, and I'm really excited about having our first live stream in November. But for now, I hope everyone is safe and well. See you next time. Bye.